Hi, I am super happy to be part of the CLV event because what two topics are more inextricably linked than loyalty and lifetime value? I have to begin with a confession, but the statute of limitations has probably run out, so I think we'll be okay. In my teenage years, I am fascinated by computers. These are primitive days. Computers live in big air-conditioned rooms with operators on duty 24/7. In those days, a dial-up connection was literally a dial-up where you dialed a rotary dial on a huge terminal to connect to the mainframe. Now, to prevent unauthorized use, these dials are secured with little locks. I know that the same key will open just about all of these locks. And one night, a sleepy grad student leaves his key in the lock and leaves. And here's my confession, I put the whole thing in my pocket. Key lock everything. Why? Well, I imagine dialing up another university's computer room at 2 in the morning and sending hundreds of ring bell commands, or better even, hundreds of paper feed commands. I imagine a sleepy operator being jolted awake and frantically trying to stop the paper avalanche. Nerd humor, I guess. But when I go to use my prize, there is a problem. The key is stuck. It won't turn or come out. So I go to a locksmith. He's a little old guy in a tiny shop, doesn't say a word, takes my lock, reaches under his counter, grabs a can of some stuff, gives it a few squirts, and lo and behold, all is good. The key turns and comes out. Now, the locksmith won't take payment for fixing my lock, but he does offer to sell me a can of the spray that he used, which I had never seen or even heard of before. How could I say no? Here's the weird coincidence. A week later, I'm at a Formula One race outside Toronto, and what do I see in the pit garage next to one of these exotic race cars? A can of the exact same stuff that the locksmith had sold me just days earlier. Now, you might be wondering what that spray was, but probably a few of you could guess. It is, of course, WD-40, because we know today that we can fix anything with two things. If it moves and it's not supposed to, we duct tape it. And if it doesn't move and it's supposed to, we WD-40 it. Ever since I met that locksmith, WD-40 has been my magic spray. I've had a can in my house ever since and use it often. Now, in the physical world, problems like frozen locks and squeaky hinges are straightforward, easy to solve. But in the business world that we live in, problems can be a lot more complicated. But first, I have a request that isn't complicated. Can you please take one finger and tap the back of your hand one time? One little tap, that's all. Remember that, I'll get back to that in a few minutes. Back to our business problems. Wouldn't it be great if there was a magic spray like that locksmith sold me that would make our business problems go away? Or better even, a loyalty spray that would cut customer churn and employee turnover. Well, sorry, I have bad news. There is no magic spray like that. But according to Richard Thaler, Nobel Prize winner in economics, the ideas that we'll be discussing here today will equip you with a mental can of WD-40. These ideas are based on behavioral science, and in particular, the interplay between motivation and effort. As business people, motivation is usually our go-to tool. We motivate our customers with advertising and discounts. We motivate our salespeople with contests and commissions. We motivate our employees with rewards and incentives. Now, what I would like you to do is instead think about effort, and in particular, unnecessary effort that I and others call friction. Often, this is what stops even motivated employees and customers from doing what you want them to do. They're motivated, they get their part way, but then it becomes a little bit too difficult, a little bit too effortful, and they stop. I would like you to imagine a world where you have happy, loyal customers and happy, loyal employees, because that's what we'll be focused on building here today. I'm going to be sure that you leave with that mental can of WD-40, and not only that, with a mental pair of friction goggles. You will be seeing more friction than before, and I know that because I am turning on your brain's reticular activating system to see more friction. Your RAS is a filter in your brain that screens out everything that isn't important in a particular moment. You can cross a busy street because your RAS filters out everything except oncoming cars, the pedestrians right around you, and the crosswalk indicator. You've had your own RAS experience if you have ever bought a new car or new to you car, Within a week, you start seeing them everywhere. Where were they before? They were there, but your RAS was filtering them out as part of the background noise. Today, we'll be enabling your RAS to see more friction that you and other people did not see before. Now, the last international conference I was able to attend before the pandemic hit was on the lovely Dutch island of Texel. Very nice hotel surrounded by walking paths through sand dunes. One of these paths had a little wood gate. I'm not sure what purpose it served. It wasn't part of a fence. It wasn't locked. Took very little effort to push open. But despite that, when I looked at the paths, it seemed that most hikers had chosen to walk around the gate rather than exerting the minimal effort to push it open. In fact, this phenomenon is so common, there's a name for it. When people find an easier way to do whatever it is you expected them to do, it's called a desire path. Sometimes these save only a few steps, but unconsciously, people will avoid that little bit of extra effort. I mean, did the designers of this roundabout really think that people were going to walk around it instead of straight through it? This is all based on something called the law of least effort. Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman says that there is a law of least effort that applies to both cognitive and physical exertion, and that people will gravitate to the least demanding path. Richard Thaler, his colleague and also a Nobel Prize winner, won his prize in part for an insight that helped millions of people around the world save more for retirement, simply by having people fill out a short form to opt out instead of a short form to opt in. That little bit of difference in effort, his colleague and fellow Nobel winner, Richard Thaler, won his prize in part for insights that have helped millions of people save more money for retirement around the world. Instead of having people fill out a short form to opt into a plan, instead, his insight was that they could fill out a short form to opt out of the plan. This tiny difference in effort has helped millions around the world have a more secure retirement. Now, let me tell you about my dog, Conan. He's getting older. He lays around the house most of the time. His favorite hobby is taking naps. But even today, there is one thing that gets his attention, and that is food. He's very motivated by food. So I decided to conduct a little experiment. I got together 3 feeding methods: a regular dog food bowl, a slow feeder bowl that slows down dogs who gulp their food too quickly, and a treat ball that makes dogs really work to get their food. And I decided to time how long it would take him to consume a meal under each of these conditions. Regular dog food bowl, half a minute or so. Slow feeder, about 5 times as long. The treat ball, almost 10 minutes. That's 20 times more effort than the regular dog food bowl. Now, you might think that Conan would be aggravated at me, but he doesn't seem to mind. We're still pals. But the key takeaway from this is that his motivation for food is off the charts. It is so high that in every single case, he consumed 100% of the food, ate every last crumb. The bad news is your customers are dogs. If you make them work a little bit harder, then whatever their alternatives are, they will probably choose one of those other alternatives. Now, remember that silly little gate? It looked like it had been there at that hotel for years. Didn't serve any purpose, took a little bit of effort to push open, a little bit of effort to walk around it, but despite that, the hotel had never seen fit to remove it. Probably, it's not a big deal, not much effort, cost some money to remove it, take some time, so it's been there for years. We all have these blockers in our customer experience and our employee experience. We will not be successful until we find these, no matter how small, and remove them. When my marketing psychology book, Brainfluence, came out, I was invited to speak at a lot of conferences. One of these was in San Francisco, and a fellow keynoter took the stage wearing what looked like a purple bathrobe covered in symbols. It seemed kind of odd even for San Francisco, but it turned out that it was B.J. Fogg. He's a researcher at Stanford and a pioneer in behavior design. He was wearing the magician's robe, as it turned out, simply to get people's attention and make his presentation a little more memorable. He is best known for his Fogg behavior model. It says you need 3 things to create or change a behavior. You need motivation. The person has to want to either do the behavior or want the result of doing the behavior. You've got to have ability, which translates into not too difficult, not too effortful. And then finally, a trigger, or as he calls it today, a prompt, just something to get the ball rolling. The key part of BJ's model is the interplay between motivation and effort. And even BJ says, don't focus so much on motivating people to do stuff, focus on making that stuff easier. And Richard Thaler puts it very simply, if you want to encourage some activity, make it easy. Simple, right? Well, how about one more little dog experiment? I got together all 3 feeding methods and divided a meal among each of them. Which do you think Conan went to first? Take your guess. Okay, of course, the easiest one. Finishes that, then goes to the next easiest one. And finally, at the end of easy stuff, carries it off to work on the difficult one off to work on in the other room. Just imagine for a moment, if the law of least effort applies even to a highly motivated dog like Conan, imagine how it affects the behavior of your much less motivated customers and employees. One brand I'm very loyal to is Amazon Prime. If I can find the product there, I'm unlikely to buy it anyplace else. But a few years ago, in my home state of Texas, they had what was in effect an 8% price increase compared to other e-commerce companies. They began charging Texas sales tax. Now, when that happened, I said in my mind, I'm going to shop around. It would be stupid to pay an extra 8% just to deal with Amazon. But when I look back a year later, my behavior had changed almost zero. Why? It was too freaking easy to keep doing business with Amazon. Shopping around, giving people credit card information, wondering if you can trust them, wondering how quickly they're going to deliver it. All of these things made it much easier just to keep doing business with Amazon, even at what was at the time a substantially higher price. Amazon has been relentless about reducing friction in all of its processes. In fact, Jeff Bezos says, when you reduce friction, make something easy, people do more of it. Now, the problem is often we don't see friction where it exists. Or even if we see it, we just say, well, that's the way it has to be. Nothing can be done about it, or it's too expensive or something. We don't do anything. And let me start by giving you an example of how disruptive a focus on friction can be. You will recognize it instantly. You know, for most of my life, I thought taxis were an effort saver, a friction reducer, easier than taking a bus, easier than walking a long distance. And then you know what happened? A couple of tech bros who had nothing to do with the transportation industry saw all the friction there was in the taxi process, from waving to try and get the attention of a taxi at the side of the street, to explaining to a driver exactly where you wanted to go, particularly if maybe there were some language difficulties, to paying at the end with credit cards or cash or even foreign currencies. Uber eliminated all that. Now, if we have to take a regular taxi, it seems like a pretty high friction experience. Another more current example, in fact, this is perhaps one of those things. We've been all doing way too many calls and conferences lately remotely. And during the pandemic, one brand emerged as the default term for that, which of course was Zoom. Now, we think of Zoom as a pandemic baby, but in fact, they were accelerating past their much bigger, better financed competition, Microsoft, Cisco, Google, for years before the pandemic hit. Why? How did this startup do that? I think it's because of their mission statement, which is one of the best I've ever seen: make communications frictionless. This provides perfect clarity to anyone, whether they're an app developer, a web designer, somebody in compliance or legal or IT. If you're going to do something that changes the customer experience, you have to ask yourself, is this going to help the mission or hinder it? I couldn't find a current mission statement for Cisco, but I did find an older one that talked about creating unprecedented value and shaping the future of the internet and all these customers, employees, ecosystem partners, whatever they are. This provides no clarity. If a designer is going to make a change to the user interface, is this going to create unprecedented value or shape the future of the internet? Who knows? Probably not. No clarity at all. Perhaps even worse was Skype, who around that same time, to prevent apparently spam users, had this insane CAPTCHA system that involved lining up arrows or something. In fact, you had to do it 10 times, which is really crazy. I'm pretty sure that even Satya Nadella would have had difficulty signing up for Skype during that period. And what we saw were the effects of that. In the space of 1 year, they went from about a third of the market to just a sliver of the market, with Zoom capturing most of that difference. Now, we're here to talk about loyalty. And Gartner, the big market research company, did a huge study of customer service interactions. What they found was startling. Customers who said they had a high effort experience, 96% of them said they would be disloyal to the brand. That's about 10 times as high as those who said they had a low effort experience. Only 4% of the high effort buyers said they'd buy again, compared to 94% of the low effort buyers. And we know how important word of mouth is these days. People want reviews, they want ratings, they want to know what other people think before they pull the trigger. 88% of the high effort customers said they would say bad things about the company, compared to just 1% of the low effort customers. Let's recap these crazy numbers. For those customers who said they had a high effort experience, 94% said they would be disloyal, only 4% would buy again, and 88% said they would say bad things about the brand. Scary, right? You know what's even more scary? That effort is in the customer's head. There's no absolute standard for effort where you can say, okay, well, I was high effort, now I'm low effort. It is the perception of effort that counts. And customers aren't comparing you only to your competitors. They are comparing you to Amazon, to Uber, to Zoom, whoever they think offers a low effort experience. Can you honestly say that your customer experience is as smooth and seamless as Amazon or Uber or some of those other brands? If you cannot answer yes, you are in danger of losing customers, even if you have great products or services. So how do you go about trying to find friction? Well, I think obviously you can examine your processes, particularly in your customer experience. You can count how many steps there are. And one thing that's really important when you're doing this analysis, don't just count major steps in the process. You've got to count every keystroke, every tap of the screen, every scroll, every click. Let me tell you about Jeff Bezos and Amazon. Back in 1997, he was talking about frictionless shopping. This was a time when a lot of companies were still trying to figure out what e-commerce was. A couple years later, they were awarded a patent for one-click ordering. A lot of companies didn't think you could patent something that simple, that easy. So pretty soon, their biggest competitor at the time, Barnes & Noble, put something similar on their website. They were quickly locked in a big legal battle. And after years in court, millions of dollars in legal fees, Amazon won. Their patent was declared to be valid. Now, what did they get for the millions of dollars they spent, all that management attention and time? Okay, remember that one little tap at the beginning? That is the level of effort that they imposed on their competitors. Barnes & Noble added a confirm order click after their buy now click. That's all. That little tiny bit of effort does not seem like it'd be worth millions of dollars, right? Well, there was one other smart guy at that same time. Steve Jobs and Apple were introducing their new music store. They saw one click, they wanted it. They didn't try and create a workaround. They didn't try and fight it in court. They paid Amazon $1 million so they too could have that one tiny little click advantage over their competitors. And if we fast forward today, we see that both Amazon and Apple are multi-trillion-dollar companies, and Barnes & Noble is not even a rounding error. So how else can you go looking for friction? Well, there are a lot of ways. One of the best ways is to simply observe customers, either remotely or in place, or however you can do it. Observe customers using your product, using your processes, using your website, your mobile app. You will find places where they're slowing down, getting stuck. You can bring people into a lab setting. You have more control there, but this tends to be expensive and a little bit unnatural. There are all kinds of both free and paid tools that you can use to analyze digital interactions. You can see where people are slowing down, where people are falling out of your sales funnel, where they seem to be confused or hesitant or backing up. Valuable clues. You can use tools like eye tracking and click tracking. See what people are looking at, in particular what people are clicking on. If you do click tracking and you aren't already, I guarantee you'll find people are clicking on stuff that is not clickable. And if you go to your web designer and say, well, hey, people are clicking on this, why? The web designer is likely to say, well, that's because they're stupid. No, if a lot of people are clicking on something, It's the design that's stupid. Either make that thing clickable or make whatever you want them to click more obvious. You can use Net Promoter Score. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. It's whether people recommend you to others, and a very high rate of or likelihood of recommendation is good. Anything that's medium or below is bad. It was presented as a one-stop shop for how good your customer experience is. I don't think it's that, but if you're not doing it, it's something at least. There's also some exciting new technologies that are just coming on the market. There are smartwatch neuromarketing tools that can measure very unobtrusively and in real time customer non-conscious reactions to your product, your content, your customer experience, even things like presentations. There are tools for conversation intelligence, which if you have a call center, you can analyze 100% of your conversations using AI and machine learning to see what are customers calling in about, what are they complaining about, what's frustrating them, how are your people responding? And this is useful both in eliminating the bottlenecks that this is disclosing and also training your people how to better address them. It's important to measure the perception of effort because that's what counts. There's a product called Customer Effort Score, and there's other tools like that. You don't have to use anybody's particular product. You can simply ask people how easy or difficult it was, but keep this process simple. Maybe a scale of 1 to 5, and then an empty text box that's optional where people can explain why they found something easy or difficult. That's it. Don't make the survey process itself a high friction experience. So I want you to pause for just a second and think about how are you measuring customer effort right now, if at all, and are you acting on it or can you? So some other things that you can do. One thing I can tell you is that your frontline employees have many of the answers themselves. Ask your people, what do our customers complain about? They'll tell you, and listen in an empathetic way. Don't simply ignore these things saying, well, yeah, that's fine, but we can't fix that. Ask them, they will tell you. And then the second question you can ask is, how can we make your job easier? First of all, you can eliminate the customer bottlenecks that's inundating these people with unnecessary calls or chats and such. But also, you'll probably find that you have internal processes that are slowing them down, that are wasting their time, and they know it. Just saw an article from Dan Ariely, the behavioral science researcher, who points out that when we have bureaucratic procedures in our organizations, it signifies a lack of trust in people and reduces their motivation. When we trust our people, when we ask them how we can help them, we are improving their motivation and improving our overall ambiance in our organization. But when you go to fix some of these things, you may run into people who aren't on the same page as you. People in IT, legal, compliance, elsewhere say, well, no, we can't do that. It's too expensive. It's a legacy code. We'll break it if we change it. It's best practice in the industry. You have to try and push back against this. And one way you can do that is by explaining the one-click story and how one tiny little click was worth millions of dollars to two of the smartest entrepreneurs of our century. A couple of other things you can do. I encourage you to keep a personal friction log. I've got a Word document that I just paste stuff into whenever I encounter a high friction process on other people's websites or mobile apps or even in person in a retail environment. You can share this information with the companies. That's always nice. But just doing this will keep your RAS activated to keep seeing more and more friction. You can analyze your own products. This is difficult, but if you go through, say, a customer process that you think you're going to adopt from the mindset of a new customer who isn't familiar with the product, make notes. Where could they be confused? Where could they slow down? Why might they not get from step A to step B? And at least it's a start. You can fix some of these things before you roll it out and get that real customer experience feedback. And in fact, you can even do a full friction audit of your customer processes and your internal processes if you want. You can engage outside organizations to do this, or you can do it on your own. But whatever you use, whether it's something very simple or perhaps more elaborate, don't try and solve those big problems first that are going to take months to solve, or maybe even years. Instead, go for quick wins. Find those little things. You can eliminate a rule, eliminate a bad process. When you do that, you are showing to your people that, wow, there's a commitment to doing this. They will be motivated, they will see that you trust them, and they will come to you with more and more small problems, or maybe a few big ones that you can solve. Now, at the outset, I talked about the interplay between motivation and effort, and how effort was often more important than motivation. You may have been a little bit skeptical of that, but now you've seen the science, you've seen the real world companies where that focus on effort has made them prosper and disrupt other whole industries. So I hope now that you're convinced. You have your mental friction goggles. I guarantee you'll be seeing more friction after our presentation. You have that mental can of WD-40 because you now see, you understand the difference between motivation and effort and how they work together. The best thing about your mental can of WD-40 is that it never runs out. In fact, the more you use it, the more effective it will be. It's time to turn your company into a well-lubricated machine that both attracts and keeps great employees and profitable customers. Today, there are already companies fighting the war against friction, and the success of their companies shows it. I invite you to join them. Join the epic battle against friction. And remember, easy is better for your customers, better for your employees, and better for you. Thank you.